Hello, hello. Welcome, greetings. Welcome to Live Culture, PhillyCAM's monthly live showcase of creative producers, which PhillyCAM has been valiantly continuing to produce during pandemic times. How are y'all doing tonight?
Well, yeah, pretty good.
Well, thank you all for sharing your Friday night together with us. We have a little something for you, a sneak peek at TrailOff, a new audio project by Swim Pony and the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. When I first heard about this project, I was like, this is exactly what I need and like all my friends need right now. Because this project combines art, nature, and you can do it by yourself while wearing a mask. TrailOff is 10 interactive audio dramas that are free to download through an app and that unfold on the Circuit Trails, which is Philadelphia's regional trail network. Each audio walk features a story written by a local author who is bringing their own special perspective to getting out into nature. My name is Yowei Shaw, and as an audio producer and lover, I am really excited to be here with some of the artists behind those audio walks, as well as the masterminds behind this entire TrailOff project. Why don't we just do a little go around and introduce ourselves?
I can start. I'm Adrienne Mackey. I am the founder and artistic director of Swim Pony, and this was my crazy idea.
I'm Lizzie Hessick. I'm the program manager of TrailOff at the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. And we were super excited to team up with Swim Pony and all of our artists to sort of explore new ways to get diverse audiences onto the trails.
Going. Okay, I'll go. I'm Ari. I am a teacher and spoken word poet, and now voice actress for this really special project. And I'm really excited to talk with everybody and to see your beautiful faces.
I think your audio's out, Aaron. I think that's why we can't hear you. Yeah.
Oh no!
Don't.
Hi, I'm Dunya Salem. And I am a resident of Princeton Junction, New Jersey, and was lucky enough to be paired with the Curriculum Trail. I'm really happy to be with everyone tonight.
And hopefully we will get Aaron's audio back in just a bit. So I want to start with unpacking the phrase audio walk, because I think for like people who haven't experienced an audio walk before, they're probably going to be like, question mark, question mark, question mark. So Adrienne, as the director of this project, can you just like first explain what is a TrailOff audio walk? Like, what will someone experience and how does it work?
So one of the things that I love walking around with music. And one of the things that's always fun about doing that is you sort of feel like you're in the center of a movie where you're like the main character and everything's happening around you. And I'm a theater director and I do a lot of work in non-traditional locations. And so I really wanted to give people kind of the feeling of being in a live performance, but that they could do whenever they wanted to. And so these audio walks are using the spaces of the trails essentially to like tell a story that's in relationship to the landscape. So they're synced to your movement. You can walk at any pace. They're filled with amazing sound design and music, and they're stories that are narrative. So they're creative experiences. They're not informational or educational.
Well, I think let's have a little taste. So here's a clip of someone experiencing a trail off audio walk, a story written by the writer Carmen Maria Machado.
All right, here we go. Can you see me? Are we good?
We're great. You can start whenever.
The first victim, Eleanor O'Toole, was found here under this bridge. The young couple who found her described her as having been folded. Oh, Jesus, this is rough.
Fun fact, the wife of that couple later went on to be a minorly successful poet.
Is that a fun fact?
I guess it just depends on your definition of fun.
How did you even know that?
I read an interview with her once. You know, she told the police back then that she saw something run away from the body as she and her boyfriend approached.
Someone. I mean, the killer, probably.
In the interview, she described it as more of a scuttle. She said it wasn't human. Her boyfriend said she was hysterical.
Anyway, let's just keep this moving.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about like the future TrailOff user who is just going to be like experiencing like running from monsters and like witnessing a murder scene while just like regular like dudes in bicycling shorts are like running by. But anyways, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the mission of this entire project. So I read somewhere that the mission of TrailOff is to diversify the stories that we imagine when we think about nature. And, you know, that resonated with me. Like I immediately had this flash of like a blur of like, you know, the image that I actually just gave of like white guys in cycling shorts, cycling past and telling you to like move over. And I was like, yeah, like, why does mainstream environmentalism feel so white? And this is just a question for like anyone in here tonight. Like, I'm just curious if anyone has a theory around like why.
I think one thing, this is Dunya here, that I would say, even instead of centering whiteness in the question of it, is saying that one of the things that's really beautifully, I think, radical, or aspires to be radical in story trails, in TrailOff, that was the previous name, is that there is because of the freedom that was given to the writers and the deep investigation and development of relationship to place, that it becomes like a decolonizing process or decolonizing practice in that, and I'm thinking about the words of Dr. Claudia Ford, who's an ethnobotanist, who really spends a lot of her time and research and kind of advocacy work around reclaiming the histories of herbal medicine, reclaiming the histories of botany in North America specifically. And so she says like that decolonization is about reclaiming and or transforming human relationship to place. And because of the, I think, freedom of the authors to tell different stories of these places that are deeply rooted in place, then it becomes a practice in decolonizing this what has been like how whiteness has been centered in the environmental movement. So I think that's a really powerful.
If I can jump in there, you know, speaking as the representative of the environmental organization, that we see that in ourselves, and a big reason that we wanted to work on this project, that we wanted to develop this project. So I work for the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, and we're part of the Circuit Trails Coalition. As a coalition, we have identified this as a problem in all of our organizations, in both the planning that we do and the the programming that we do around nature and trails. We've been trying for several years now to to strategize around how we can incorporate more diversity and equity and inclusion and justice into the work that we're doing. So that's happening in several ways that if you want to go to circuitrails.org, you can find out. But TrailOff being a major part of, just like you're saying, Dunya, the people of color belong in nature. And there's just this sort of perception, I think, of white people that it's surprising, which is wrong and needs to be, corrected. So giving a space where those non-white voices can be at the forefront felt like something that was really important to move forward.
When I talked with Adrienne a little bit before tonight, and she mentioned, that one of the big drivers of this project was this idea that environmentalism essentially had this narrative problem, this narrative that, like what you mentioned, Lizzie, about this perception that environmentalism is meant for white people and not meant for people of color. And I wanted to ask the artists if even that idea itself, how that idea resonates with you, if you've witnessed that as a narrative if you've seen that play out, if you've witnessed that, and how you think about that narrative problem.
Yeah, I think I'd like to speak to that. I used to be a bird watcher. I still love birds. I'm mostly a bird complimenter now. But I used to go out and hike a great deal and look at birds. And I found that exact fact that the trails were primarily white. And I really had two options, either to be tokenized on the trail as the only person who was just beige and speaking Spanish with my little, calling my mom every 30 minutes if I felt nervous. Very, very small. But then other times I would see old men, and especially even just older kids and kids my age that were all white, and they would make me actively uncomfortable being there, either by not interacting with me with things, or I have pretty clear images of old men with their scopes out and looking at a bird. And I remember it was just a very big sign of respect for to be able to walk over there and speak to them. And it's a lot of factors. It's that I'm of color, but it's also that I look like I do. I was always queer. Even when I was little, I was visibly queer before I knew I was queer. And when I walked up to them, they knew that, and there was this disconnect, even if they didn't consciously know it. So I think about that, and I think about the trails. It's I had the privilege to go to the trails, but it wasn't until I did this project that I really felt at home there.
Well,
can I name?
Oh yeah, Erin.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yay! I've had a similar experience as Ari as well. Recently, I've even found myself hiking a lot more. It was never something that, I thought that people who looked like me did. And, the deeper out into the woods I get, the whiter it kind of gets. And there's also several trails that I won't go on by myself. There's no way on God's green earth you're getting me into the Pine Barrens because I'm afraid of being Black and alone and in the middle of the woods by myself, in a space where there aren't many, if any, people like me. So there's definitely something there, so.
Well, Lizzie, you spoke earlier as our representative from the environmental movement here tonight. You mentioned that you all, your organization realized a while ago that this was a problem. And I'm wondering, like, do you have any sense or hunches of like, like we're all kind of coalescing around this like feeling and this problem, and I'm just wondering, like, going back, or like, do you know why? Like, I'm just curious, but like, what do you think has led to this current narrative perception and also, very concrete reality that we're identifying?
I mean, I would say systemic white supremacy that is infiltrating our entire culture and like country. I think that it is certainly not only something that affects the environmental movement, but since the environmental movement started in, let's say, the 1900s, it has been a deeply racist movement that has put Indigenous people and people of color not only not in the narrative, but like directly attacked these communities as well, as a white community has felt like it needed to protect nature for itself. So I think that it's just baked into the movement. And there are many organizations now that are trying to do what needs to be done to make these organizations and the movement itself more inclusive of not just because it's right to do so, but because many of the communities that are being the most impacted by climate change, by environmental injustices, are communities of color, are the voices that aren't in the conversation right now. So there's so much more that needs to be happening. It's hiring practices, it's board makeup, it's the way that we think about programming, it's the way that we think about what is appropriate in nature. All of that needs to be reimagined and reevaluated and reclaimed. So I feel like it's hard to put a pinpoint on where it is in the environmental movement that sort of led us astray. I think it's just the entire, from the get-go, in the places that this movement, as it's called a movement, certainly there is environmental work that has been happening in communities of color since forever. I mean, since we have recorded history. But the way that we have defined it as a movement, it's baked in from its inception and is very slowly, but I would like to say is intentionally trying to change and become a more just movement.
If I can jump in
And
with one more.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. If I can jump in with one more thought, because like one of the reasons that I think the stories that people are going to hear in this project are going to like blow their minds is that, and I really like I didn't know exactly what this would look like because I knew that it had to come out of the collaboration, but I just like in my bones I was like, if we get folks who are amazing at thinking about the places that they're in through the work that they create, they're gonna help all of us like understand nature in different poetic metaphors. And like every single story, whether it's like an action hero where like literally like the space around you like rises up out of the DNL canal and like Aaron's protagonist is like running through the space, like your physical relationship is different to that story versus like Ari's, where like the Aztec gods are like coming out of the sides of the trail, whereas like Donya's is this like archaeological dig of like all the history of the space plus like this very intimate personal story. And it's like your physical relationship also changes to place because of the way that they write about it.
Well, I would like to start talking about those audio walks. Aaron, let's start with you. If it's all right, I would like to read a little bio for you first. So Aaron T. McMillan of the Inside Outside audio walk for the DNL Trail. Aaron is an urban horror and suspense author, blogger, and artist from Trenton, New Jersey. Her work has been viewed and purchased by readers and curators from around the world. She's the author of several books: What's Hiding in the Dark, 10 Tales of Urban Lore, They Eat, an episodic zombie thriller, and The Abducted, with a forthcoming release, Simone, to be released in the fourth quarter of 2019. Well, without too many spoilers, because I know we don't want to give too much away about any of the audio walks because we're talking about narrative here, y'all. Could you just give a brief description of your story in a sentence or two, Erin?
Oh, that's hard. Can you hear me though? Because I'm scared.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
good.
Yes, we can.
Just wanted to check again. The Inside Outside is just kind of, I think the title of it kind of speaks to what it's really about. It's a young woman. Her name is Trenton. I struggled with her name for a long time, but then, what better name than where I'm from? So she she wakes up on the trail and she doesn't know where she is. And she embarks on this journey to kind of figure that out. So it's literally about, being outside and how that's reflective of what's going on inside. And kind of rediscovering who you are, as you move through life. And I think that was maybe 3 or 4 sentences, but I'm not sure.
You did. You did
Okay.
fabulous.
Good.
Well, your audio walk has, can I just say, epic fight scenes, so satisfying, those fight scenes. And I especially love the image of Trenton, your main character, fighting with the wind monster.
Yeah.
And there are just so many laugh out loud moments from your walk, which I have so much respect for, because I think humor is especially hard to pull off in audio form for whatever reason. But I heard from Adrienne that when you met with her before applying for the project, you ended the meeting kind of saying I look forward to working on this audio walk with you when you choose me. And which of course Adrienne was she told me, she was like, you're totally right. That's what I was thinking. I'm absolutely choosing you. You are perfect for this project. And I'm wondering, why were you so drawn? Why were you so sure and drawn to this project in the first place?
I feel like it was a perfect opportunity. It fit who I was and who I was growing into at that time. The way it came about was also kind of weird, I guess you would say. I went to a meeting that I didn't want to go to, and just trying to push myself to really take my art, to really project to the world how seriously I take my art. I think I just for a while I would just make things and then just let them sit. So anyhow, so I went to this meeting that I didn't want to go to, and the woman there said to me, hey, I have a friend who's doing this really cool project. I think you'd be interested in it. And she's like, I'll email you. And people will say they're going to do things and it doesn't happen, but she actually emailed me. And I'm looking at a description of what the project's goals are and kind of what a writer would be asked to do. And I'm like, hey, this is me. This fits me perfectly. I just started hiking. So I started going outside a lot more. I just really started getting into trying to push my books. Again, I'd write them and then they just sit on a hard drive. So it was just kind of, things were full circle, and it just didn't make sense to me. It'll sound weird, but it didn't make sense to me that the universe would set all of these ducks up and not give me what made sense. It just made sense. So I didn't want to be cocky, but I kind of just felt like I already knew it was going to happen. So,
And it did. It was
yeah.
really meant to be.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, I think earlier in the conversation that you start the story with Trenton, your main character, going why the fuck am I in New Hope? Which was hilarious as I was attention is grabbed. My attention is grabbed immediately. Why did you want why did you want to start that way?
Like I was saying earlier, the DNL trail intersects with the DNR canal, and I spent my entire childhood, playing on that canal, walking home from school, and I got assigned to GNL and I took a trip down there, and I'm like, why does this canal in my neighborhood look completely different than this canal 2 miles up the road? You know, our canals in my neighborhood look like they're not very pleasant. It's not a very pleasant experience. And, so it was just the same canal, but there's just such a stark difference in the environment. So I thought it would be really cool to take a character that was from where I'm from and put her smack dab into a completely different environment and just have her waking up. Because why the fuck is she in New Hope? You know? So that's kind of where I was going with that.
And, at various points in your audio walk, the main character seems to like snap out of the horror movie that she's in, and she just like gets lost in reverie of the flowers and the trees. Like she's like noticing the world around her and like being really present. But then she's constantly pulled away from that reverie back into like trying to like, run away from these monsters. And that like obviously feels like such a metaphor for, it resonated with me for like what happens all the time of like being too engrossed in like the scary movie of our own lives to stop and just like look around and go on a trail and like be in nature and like look at some cute flowers. And I'm wondering if like being on the trail, I imagine you were on the trail a lot for your research. How much is a lot? I'm curious. This is a question for all the artists, actually. Like, how much were people on their trails for their research?
I was there so much that people stopped wanting to come with me. Like the children abandoned me. Everyone abandoned me. So,
That's hilarious.
where you going to the trail? Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if being on the trails so much over the past, I don't know how long it's been, I'm guessing months and months and months, maybe even years, if that's like shifted anything for you personally, like in the way that you perceive, or the way that, if it's shifted how you show up in space, or, any of it.
I think it does. I think it's kind of difficult because it gives you this feeling, you know, because it's a really beautiful space. But I think it's also going back to, Trenton, snapping in and out of these different realities. It's, you want to carry that feeling with you, but there's just so much going on, So I wish there was like an all day trail that I can spray on myself in the morning and carry that smell with me,
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. But it definitely, this is also the first trail I've walked like 3 miles down on. I did 3 miles down. So it's the longest space that I've ever been outside and moving through. So it did allow me to kind of build my confidence and do other things, go into other outside spaces. But yeah.
Are there any like trail norms that you especially, liked? And I'm also wondering about trail norms that you did not care for so much that you saw along the way.
Trail norms I like is that most people will say hello. The ones that I don't like is when they don't say hello. Because you get used to it. You get used to passing by people. Even, when I come home, I'm like, hey, neighbor, to all the neighbors. And they're like, why is this lady waving at me? Because she's never spoken to me before. But it just made me, feel like all of the people were my friends and we were outside and doing things. And so then I guess, when someone doesn't say hello, it's kind of like, what's wrong with you? And why are you so stinky poofy right now? So,
It's true. It's true. When somebody doesn't say hello to you to me on a trail, I'm like, how dare they?
How dare you? You're fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So, so obviously your walk is about a lot of different things, but one of the central themes is obviously motherhood and like fighting to like find a path back to yourself, and of course there are kids, there are kids that show up, Trenton's kids that show up in the story, as somewhat, like annoying, I think on purpose. And, I've been wondering about, like, have your kids, gone on, have you let them preview any of your audio walk and story so far? And like, what do they, yeah, just curious about how the kids are feeling about
A little bit. My daughter she's like, that doesn't sound like me. And I'm like, well, it's not supposed to be you, girlfriend. Um,
It's fiction.
They're my kids, so we're a little unorthodox. So, I mean, they're pretty okay. I mean, they're used to mom dropping F-bombs all the time, clearly not directed at them, but in the general space. So it's fine. They do think I'm famous though, which I'm not going to tell them I'm not. I'm just going to let that ride out because it sounds pretty cool in like middle school. Um, but I think that's part of the that's why she wakes up alone, is because as you go through motherhood, I think some people think that your children are just like your mini me's, but they're not. They're people, and you are trying to maintain who you are and also still figure out who you are, and that's really freaking hard when you have other human beings depending on you. Um, so it they better like it, because they haven't listened to it in its entirety, but they better like it or they're fired too. Everybody's fired.
Well, on that note, why don't we listen to a clip of your audio walk, the inside outside?
All right, cool.
Who's back there? Is that you, old man? I said, who the fuck is back there?
Oh, look who we have here. It's been so long, girl. I thought we'd never meet again. I am everywhere, child. Literally with you on every step you've ever taken outside.
Don't look back. Keep running.
There's no point in trying to fight.
Don't listen to him.
Run all you want, and when you stop, I'll still be there.
Shit! My leg. You have to get off this ground, girl.
Look at you, all sad and pathetic. And to think they told me I'd have a fight on my hands.
Please don't hurt me.
You still don't get it, huh? All of you are the same. You never realize that you're hurting yourself.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That was amazing. Wow. I mean, I think, Erin, you're going to give people legit nightmares. Like, for real. Those monsters.
I just want to shout out to Brian Anthony Wilson, who plays the rock monster character, and Danielle Lene, who plays Trenton. Casting this story was so much fun, and when Erin was like they better be good, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get you the best actress in this story.
Well, thanks so much, Erin. Well, our next artist, Ari, is a spoken word poet and educator based in North Philadelphia who began their career writing erotic fan fiction and large-scale games of Dungeons and Dragons. Their work focuses on the intersectionality of queer identity, trauma, and the Latin experience as an outsider. Ari is a member of Babel, and Dead Name collectives, and has been featured in Bedfellows and Paperback, and was featured on the Philly poetry show Drop the Mic. Ari is currently looking to adopt a large cat whom they can name King Bastard. And the name of Ari's walk is Where the Light Won't Go for the Chester Valley Trail. Ari, can we start with just like a brief, if you had to like sum up your story without too many spoilers, could you do that for me first?
Wow, okay. I'm going to have to think about this because you made my head so big. And this prophecy that you wrote, because it's my bio from like a year ago. So King Bastard's over there.
Oh, hey.
I would say it is an underworld narrative about making peace with your family posthumously, about this idea that I've thought about a great deal, where I know that a huge swath of my family will either die never knowing that I'm trans or choose never to talk about it. So I thought about it as how would I make peace with that, but also how could I interact and make this trail my family and speak to them as if they were my family and think about what the best case scenario would be for these conversations.
You know, I heard that you have some personal experience with this trail from, you know, your childhood. And I also heard on your application that you made it very clear that you wanted the Chester Valley Trail. So I just kind of want to start there with like, why this trail so much?
It was about, I want to say, a mile from my parents' house. It's somewhere that different parts of it, I'd been there a great deal, but the part that I chose to go to was kind of cursed for me because that specific chunk I'd only been to once, and I went running with my dad and I threw up on my shoes because I'm not good at running. And I remember that super vividly. And I was looking for chunks of the trail. I kept asking my friends that I had in bird watching is where would I go? Where would I go? But I knew where I had to go. I knew the part that I thought I would never go to again that was so close to a hospital of people like nurses that don't know who I am, that don't know my real name, that don't know that I'm trans at all. And that I know for a fact when this is started that because my mom has told them that they'll know this part of me that they never knew before. So it felt like it was all coming into place, and it was a bit messy to write there, and it was a bit messy to make these caricatures of my family and extend parts of them. But I knew that I had to take pieces of myself for this. I knew I had to put myself in. And when they gave me the opportunity to voice the protagonist, I was really thrilled because it's secretly what I wanted, but I didn't want to tell anyone. It was really exciting.
Well, you know, I'd heard that originally you were thinking that Dog, the god of death in your story, was just going to like speak to the audio walker as they went on this journey. But then you added Luce to the story. Why did it feel? Can you talk about that decision, that addition of Luce, and you know what parts of you did you draw on to create her?
So, wow, that's a big question. I remember when the interactive part of this project was at the core of it, I was like, obviously, I'm going to have this person directly interacting with nature, directly interacting with the trail, directly interacting with my audio. And of course, everything will go dominoes exactly in the order that it needs to. They'll feel exactly what they want to and everything. But that's not true. Adrian described it almost like a video game. And I had to think about it like that, where if the person has 100% control and they're reacting, you don't really have a gauge on that. I think about it a lot of spoken word, where I won't say it's a running joke, but it's a little bit of a curse for trans writers who do spoken word poems. The seven of knowing that people liked your poem but don't know anything about trans people, or don't really think that being trans is something that you should make that much of a fuss about. And I knew that if I let the person just try to step into those shoes, that they wouldn't necessarily fit. And I wanted to tell this story. I wanted to make peace with a lot of these things. Luce in particular is a little scrappier than I was at the time. I was quiet in my own way. I think I talked a lot in a performative sense, but with my true self, I was never really someone who I felt could fight for me instead of fighting for a face. And in particular, this story starts, this is an underworld narrative. It's not spoilers to say that it starts with a car crash. And I myself, when I was 18, almost died in a car crash in Costa Rica. And I remember part of this story, and to this day, my family, every time they see me, they're like, when are you going to learn how to drive? And I go, I don't know, when I can stop thinking about body parts. So I started thinking about this trail as something where I could reconcile it and face my adolescence and face my identity early and with more honesty and power than I could have otherwise.
You know, I love the music too in the walk. You know, like it starts with this crash, this really intense explosion of glass and bits of dialogue and the hospital sirens, and it's, you know, the car crash, and then then it explodes into this like really satisfying, like kind of emo, like rock music that repeats itself throughout the entire walk. And, you know, like I loved it. And also I was thinking like, this is an odd bedfellow for this like underworld narrative. And I'm wondering about that choice of music.
Oh my God. Mike just spooled it out of my brain. I swear. Really incredible work. I was really thinking, and I think you really got it when we were talking, that I wanted this angst to it. I wanted this feeling. I think YA is a bad word when it comes to fiction. Like young adult literature is something that's innately more childish, or that has this notion that it's not real literature. And there's protagonists of every age and there's authors of every age. I thought there was something so special about being like, what if I played the music that I thought I would be listening to then? Like when I was a teenager, when I was this like teenage version of myself. What if there was this audio that not only reflected what I felt and what I wanted to hear, but also the trail outside. Every single piece is so masterfully done with both what's happening in the story and also reflecting what's around.
And
if I could just like throw a little plug in for Mike Kiley, who did the sound design and composition for the piece.
Incredible.
Just like an incredibly important collaborator, and also like with me sort of talking to the artist over like the very long period of time. And so I think like part of it was Mike really got to know these guys super well. And I think that's why the music feels just like so personal and crafted to their work.
And just one last question before we listen to a clip of your walk. The gods in your story are each so vividly drawn and, you know, just like hilarious in their mannerisms and foibles, and like the less so extremely quotable. I was like, writing down quotes of their advice. I was like, I'm gonna put it on my whiteboard. But yeah, I mean, what inspiration did you pull on in creating those godlike characters and that poetic voice that they spoke in?
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I worked really hard on this. I think I definitely took inspiration from my family. Did I cut out? Because my audio cut out for a moment. Am I good? Okay, perfect. All right. I remember talking to my family, and the last time I saw my family, and I wanted to bring out some of that energy of like aunts and uncles and people who are going to be poking and prodding at you and that love you, but also would like you to be a certain way. And when that doesn't work in my life, that's just been something that's going to be constantly, bless you, a barrier to hit your head against. But in this story, I wanted it to go smoothly, and there was something so special about that. And when I was writing their voices, I thought a lot about the mythology that they're based on, about the images that came to mind when I wrote that. And to this day, I'm still working with mythology in all of my work, both as a poet, a writer, but also as an educator. It's something that is a very strong basis of who I am and how I teach. So I was really trying to bring that in and bring in how I thought they would talk, but also how I wanted them to talk.
Well, let's listen to a clip of where the light won't go.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you? Wait up! Please, you have to help me. There's been we need to get someone. Señora! Por favor. Necesito.
They can't hear you. And they can't see you. Walk with me.
I'm dead, right? We're dead.
You're dead. Walk with me.
Are you... Death?
I'm Dog.
Well, let's end with our final artist of the night. Dunya Salem Harhor is an Egyptian-American co-conspirator with her 12-year-old cub, ED of the Outlet Dance Project. She's an alumnus of the Community of Writers Irvin Bush Women's Summer Leadership Institute, Open Mouth Poetry Retreat, and several Winter Tangerine Review and Speakeasy Project workshops. A principal dancer and choreographer with Sakshi Productions, she is part of the Brown Girl in the Ring collective. She was a 2016 artist in residence with Swim Pony. Her poetry has appeared in Anomaly, Ballet Review, and Sukun magazines. Dunya believes fervently in game nights. She has her MFA in interdisciplinary art from Goddard College. And she's writing for the Perkiomen Trail, and the title of her audio walk is A Sycamore Psalm. So, Dunya, you begin your story with this incantation, almost like this spell. I felt like there was a casting of a spell to remember. And for a lot of the walk, it feels like I'm like walking with someone reading from their poetry book as they are like processing a lot of things, grief, disease, aging in the family. And, you know, those seem like, you know, the things that I might, you know, expect to be in a poetry book. But then there's also these other parts of the walk where I'm reminded to be awake to like what has happened in also the land, the trees, the soil, the buildings around, and just like the communities surrounding the trail. And I'm just curious, you know, why did you want to focus so much on legacy and how to remember all these disparate pieces of where legacy can live?
Thank you for the question. I think a lot about, I'm a caregiver for my father who has dementia, and his dementia began as a disease called primary progressive aphasia. And primary progressive aphasia is a disease that is merciless in how it eats language. It disappears language from someone's brain so that you reach for a word but can't find it. When my father was healthier, he told me that he could see a word and know it, and he would reach for it, it would be like in quicksand, and he couldn't grasp it. He couldn't retrieve it and bring it to his mouth. So I think a lot about erasure, and what is memory and what is forgetfulness, and what stories we share, all the stories that are lost also, and the body as an archive, and family, and how we move through our worlds of our families, of our communities, and how that all ripples out as archives, as a whole collection of archives, and how we layer in our connections with one another. And there are ways that there's a porousness that enriches all of us, but at the same time, we are also so distant from one another too. So, and then I also, of course, think of that in terms of migration and being a child of diaspora and child in diaspora, and that what is home, like where do we make home? Where do we become fortified and nourished? How do we reconnect with like things that feel like they're living in the ether, but at the same time they're in ourselves? And so to me, it seemed like layering all of that to be able to walk on a trail that has this rich history, right? You have the Perkiomen is a 20-mile trail in Montgomery County. It's gorgeous, right? And you go through, I walked the 20 miles over the time, you know, to try and really understand, to try and develop a relationship with the place, but also to get an idea of what would be the ideal place, right, for this particular story, but also at the same time, what story do these different sections of the trail have to share, right? So that it would be, you know, that I was, you know, aspire for like a reciprocity with location, you know, so that, and a listening to the place. I think it was very important for me in the process. And so you have like the Perkiomen was formerly a railroad line, so it's part of that Rails to Trails movement. And it also has, you know, Pennsylvania has this devastating history of deforestation, where the vast majority of Pennsylvania's forests, old growth forests, like are non-existent, right? Billions and billions of acres were felled and used for lumber, replaced, used for industry. You know, so many trees were burnt even to create ash to, you know, to smelt metal. And so there's this, and at the same time you go and there are these magnificent, you know, on the Perkiomen, there are places where you feel so embraced and sheltered and held by these towering trees. And also just having that realization, like none of these trees are elders. They are incredible. And at the same time, they are also like kids in diaspora too, right? Like they have been disconnected from their roots, and they are, I think there's always a longing for us. I think I can say for myself, there's always a longing. And I feel like for me, as someone that is navigating the real time, although I would say like now during coronavirus, all of us are also navigating this idea of like ambiguous loss, where we're mourning in real time, we're navigating trauma, and there's this shifting of earth, that everything is different. So I think about like how does the natural world experience that too? So all those layers, like there's also like who built that railroad, like what about all those Irish kids and Italian kids that came and built that railroad and weren't paid well and had to, so many died from malaria and like so many different things that happened. What about all the ice that was that was taken from the Perkiomen Creek, right, to provide ice for Pennsylvania, for Philly, for DC? What about all of the, what to speak of the indigenous folks, right, of the land, what to speak of, like they should be first and foremost spoken of, So layering and like kind of contemplation felt like the way to consider all of that there, to balance, like to go from macro to micro and like kind of in that accordion expanding, and how that they are both always related to one another.
Yeah, I feel like after listening to your story, it shifted my awareness and perception, like because there's so much, like all these questions that your poems are asking, and kind of asking the listener to just like think about the history and legacy of all these, like just all of it, and it felt I had this perceptual shift. Why don't we listen to a clip too of your walk real quick?
Mama had so many dreams for the two of us, for our life together. None looked like this returning. Everywhere is the prickle of her anxieties, the shadows of her guilt. I know she is relieved whenever I disappear along this path to take shelter of these sky-reaching woods and the banks of my meandering creek. Here is my sanctuary, the home where all of me feels whole and at ease. At the house, every part fractures, disintegrates. Giddu has been sick for so long, I have a really hard time remembering him, not forgetting, not speaking without jumbling his words, not suspecting anyone of taking his things anymore. Teta and Mama insist I still have so many memories from before, that I can recall if I just try. They push me to stretch my mind back into the bedrock of myself. This just makes me back away, tired and hidden. How much more do they want me to cry for a return that cannot come? I am an eggshell boat on the Perkiomen Creek, trying to keep from coming apart.
That's beautiful.
I just want to shout out Kinan Abu Afaf. He is an incredible Syrian American oud player and cellist and composer, and brilliant. And that was his playing at the end.
So I just want to thank the artists for sharing in that conversation and sharing your work tonight. And throw it to Adrian and Lizzie. Like, how can people access this amazing work? When will the people have it, and where can they get it?
So it'll be premiering in September. You can go to www.trailoff.com and sign up to be notified when it's available for download. It's going to be totally free and available for a year. There's going to be a whole bunch of programming just like this where you can hear the artists talk about their work during Fringe Arts from September to October.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to Live Culture. If you missed any of tonight's conversation, you can visit PhillyCAM's YouTube channel to watch the entire show. Have a good night. Thanks all.
Thank you.